Hello, I'm Janine Nodder, and this is Chattin' with Janine Presents, your historic New Hampshire State House. This is Terry Poff,
Very good.
COO, and I'm going to have him explain that. I have been mispronouncing your name for 14 years. I always thought you were Terry Pfaff, and then today I learned that he's
It's Poff like cough.
Poff like
Terry Poff.
So Terry, can I call you Terry?
Sure, please.
Okay. Tell me what your job description is again. I know you were a former state rep, and then I want to hear everything about the history of this
Sure.
wonderful building.
So I was a former state representative from 88 through about 98. And then I became special assistant to the Speaker of the House, and then I became House Chief of Staff. I'm currently the longest serving House Chief of Staff to date. And then in 2018, we started a new position because the legislature was going from Democrat to Republican, Republican to Democrat, so there was no consistency in leadership for the administration of the General Court. So they created a position called the Office of the Chief Operating Officer. And I'm the first Chief Operating Officer for the General Court. And so looking at our wonderful building here, this is about the third iteration of the State House. The first one was very, very small and original, and it's actually hiding behind the portico itself right now. The other side, yeah. So if you look at the portico and the columns, those are an addition from the about 1876, I think, is when those went up. So hiding behind the state seal up there is the original opening and the original roof line of the original State House. There used to be two doors on each side of this instead of the central door in the middle. So there's a lot of additions that have taken place. There was a 1910 addition that put on the back of the State House itself.
The new part is from 1910.
That's the newest part of our State House. And then part of the complex was 1975 was the Legislative Office Building. So that took place in 1975 and through George Roberts. And you have to realize that it wasn't until 1985, around 85 it was, that we always had biennial sessions, that we weren't in session annually. You had a first year session, they got the budget done, and the legislature all went home, and they came back for a special session generally in the second year, but that was it. So they were very much a part-time legislature. But the General Court now has a full-time footing in the state, and you have to remember that the General Court was named first in the Constitution for a reason, because the people in New Hampshire never really trusted government, and they put checks and balances into everything. So that's why we're here now.
So back in the day, when 200 years ago, Where did the representatives stay?
Well, they had a lot. They went back and forth. There were some hotels. Right, the Eagle Hotel right across the street was here, and we had less representatives back then. And there was a time in the legislature where really the train companies ran the legislature pretty much, because trains were everything back in the 1800s, and they brought people in from the outskirts of New Hampshire, from every hamlet in New Hampshire, and the locals went back and forth. But it was again why it was transportation wasn't what it was today. So that's why it was biennial sessions as well, because it took a lot of a commitment to come in here off the farms to get things done, because we were very much an agricultural state in the first 100 years of our state.
What is the building made of?
It's made of granite. Came right off of Swanson's granite, off of the hill up there on Concord. And it was pretty much built with prisoners, which was nice. And so they lugged all the granite down, carved it and cut it and brought it in. The columns were turned down in Massachusetts, actually.
Shall we go inside?
Sure.
This chamber I call the House of Lords. That would make us the House of Commoners, but it's really the Senate chamber.
Yep, and this is Senate chamber, and it was, as you notice up on top, when she pans, you'll see the scales of justice too. The Supreme Court used to meet in here as well in the early days. But if you look behind us and you focus in on these beautiful murals that were done in the 40s, they're pretty amazing. And we just had a renovation, because you have to remember, smoking in public places just barely was eliminated in just the end of the last century, really. And so if you look, and there was a couple of public places that just barely got done a few years ago, even in this facility. But in the old days, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even into the 70s, they used to be able to smoke in these rooms. So the nicotine stains, the smoke stains were all over everything, and they really clouded the murals. So the original folks, the fellow's name was Faulkner, that did those murals back in the 40s. And he was involved with actually all the camouflaging, what you know today as camouflage. Interestingly enough. And so they had a formula, Faulkner had a formula left over for cleaning these things. And so after all those years of smoking, they were so dull that if you zoom in over there behind the television monitor, above it, there's a window that's pretty bright, and you can see it now. You couldn't even tell that was a bright window before we cleaned it.
Oh, wow.
It was unbelievable. And Faulkner's known for the brilliance and the way the murals pop, and his colors were so brilliant all the time, and the shadowing. So those came back nicely, and it was because of the formula he used. And they did it with Q-tips and cotton balls and by hand the whole time. So this is quite a renovation of this space. It was including the carpeting and everything else. And so it really came out very, very nice. All the gold leaf was redone, new fans in the windows, and did a pretty nice job in this room, because it really deserves it. So now you're looking at the back side of the State House, and that is the original wall of the State House that they actually moved when they did one of the renovations. So in the front, under the portico, is this exact same half round, and it just mimics it from front to back. So in 2019, they had a bicentennial commission that was to celebrate the 200 years of the State House itself here, our New Hampshire State House. And prior to that, there was just, in that half round, there was never any glass. There was just a piece of plywood with some plexiglass in it. But to commemorate the 200th anniversary, 1819 to 2019, we had that built, and we used the same company that built the stained glass window over the front of the original State House, which was still in business. And there was a company that stained glass out of Ohio. So we reached out to them, and we got the same stained glass colors, and we had artisans in Portsmouth put it together for us. And it has the depiction of the original State House as it looked in 1819 in the center. So it's a really pretty neat commemoration, and it really adds some color, because it's backlit at night. And so when you come in here in the evenings, when folks are in session, it's dark at 4 o'clock in the middle of winter, so you can see it, and it's backlit, and it looks very cool back then. And it commemorates the 200 years of the anniversary of the State House. And you can see the brickwork on the outside. If you can pan to that, you'll see that's the new edition. We're standing in the 1910 edition, and this is the new edition of the State House. So again, taking care of this building and taking care of this whole facility is always a big challenge. And one of the challenges was painting this inside courtyard. It used to be some really in disrepair, and we were able to put it together and get it done. So it worked pretty well. And it's fun work, it's good work, and it's needed work.
All right, so what are you going to tell us about this wonderful room?
So I've had the opportunity as House Chief of Staff to oversee two renovations of this room. One was in about 2004, where we actually shut the legislature down early, about May 15th, and then we were able to get the House and the Senate done their business that year so that we could have a longer time to renovate this room, and that was a major renovation. So you see all of the scroll work and all of the plaster work in here. It's very ornate. Well, you can't really get tradesmen to do that anymore, so we had to go to Boston and grab some tradesmen from down there, bring them up, and have them reconstruct and renovate and replace a lot of these broken pieces that were up there. So then we did all of the painting, and that was in the 2004 time. So then again in 2018, because one of the jobs and roles of this position of Chief Operating Officer is long-range planning and facility maintenance as well. And I oversee the IT department and oversee security and administration, budget building, the whole nine for the general court. But one of the more fun things is the long-range planning and the restoration of this historic building that is the People's House. So this chamber is where you're standing, as you've seen on the sign out front, is we have the longest, oldest chamber in the country where the general court meets and the House meets in its original chamber. And this is the original chamber. It's been reconfigured, so when you look back and you do the pans, you'll see some columns. It's been smaller, it's been larger. It's capped at 400 now, but it actually went up to about 436 at one time.
Yeah,
so
I heard that.
yeah, so I believe that's the number. Virginia can correct me because she will if I'm wrong. And so one of the challenges in this room when we were renovating is that we had to remove these large portraits you see behind us. And if you see George Washington, we've got Franklin Pierce, we've got Senator Hale, we've got Daniel Webster, and Abraham Lincoln. These are significant portraits, and they're very, very large and very hard to handle. So we had to have crates built to protect them while we were doing the renovations. We had to pull down these 1910 chandeliers that are up there. And this one actually, if you look up to one of these chandeliers, it actually fell on the way down when we were restoring it.
I remember that.
And we had to have that all restored. That was treacherous, but it did indicate that we needed to put some new lowering and raising mechanisms with safeties all through it because they were still running under the 1910 mechanisms. So again, we renovated that and replaced it so that everybody be in a much safer environment down here. So those are the challenges of the hall. We air conditioned it in about 2018, I believe it was.
And we've been freezing in here ever since, I might add.
And it works well. It's really, I told the members that it wasn't for them anyway. It was really to keep the humidity for the building and the paint and the portraits. So they just get the benefit of the air conditioning. So it works well.
Yeah, before there was air conditioning, it was customary on hot days for a female member to go up to the well and ask permission for the gentlemen to remove their jackets if they so wish.
Yeah, it still is, and they still do that. So behind you see the speaker's podium, and the speaker wields a gavel, and that what you see just to the right of the podium itself as you're looking from the podium is called a striking post. That striking post is made out of New Hampshire walnut, and it's 5 feet long, and it goes right to the floor of that well. So when you pick it up, you can pick the whole thing up. It's a solid piece of walnut, and it's the same piece of walnut in the same tree that the gavels were turned out of. So we had a craftsman from Goffstown, Mark Batty, create both of those things for us and stain them. So those were made, and he donated them actually, and that was a nice thing for him to do. Wow. And Joe Butts had the actual piece of New Hampshire walnut, and it was a big, huge tree that they turned it from. So it made it very, very nice, and it resonates when he hits the gavel, as you well know. It resonates well through here. So
the house will come to order. Bang.
And so we also renovated the Senate chamber in 2018 as well. And so those are both the chambers are in pretty good shape right now. And like I said, this one was expanded. At one time, those were offices where the gallery was.
Oh, I didn't know that. I remember sitting up there watching the proceedings before I was a state representative.
And all the general public can come in here. And another reason, as you were talking about the microphones, is now that we live stream these, you have to speak into the microphone clearly because you won't get your message out to the general public during the stream either. So we capture everything that goes on in the chamber now too as well.
Well, you know the closed captioning, it's live, and sometimes it's kind of hysterical because it's not really what the people are saying, but it's what the machine thinks they're saying.
It really is neat. It's a service that we provide, and it's if anybody needs anything differently, they can request it. But that really works well for us.
So when the fourth graders come for their yearly visit, they sit in section 3 and they have questions, and we like to point out the portraits to them. Of course, everybody knows Abraham Lincoln, and I like to point out our first president, George Washington, the father of our country. And then sometimes it's fun to just point out Mr. Hale over there, because his daughter has a piece, is part of history as well.
That's correct. Yep, she is. She was dating John Wilkes Booth, actually, and so she got ushered out to Europe after all that took place. So yeah, we have New Hampshire has a history and a rich history in every part of our nation. Really, we were the ratification state, so we were the 9th state that actually ratified the Constitution. So we've had an important hand in almost every part of history that goes through, and you notice it when you have international delegations come through, like
we have a lot
the
of them.
Japanese
Yes.
delegation, and how they were talking about the support that we gave them during the war and after the war, and the Koreans and the Korean conflict when they came in. And so we have a rich history of folks coming through here, and everything that we've done throughout history.
And the fourth graders have all known who John Wilkes Booth is, which is good for them.
It is good for them.
And then we tell them that Lucy's picture was found in his pocket.
Yeah.
Yes, after
Yep.
the fact.
That is cool.
Well, thank you.
Certainly.
The first time I ever came to the New Hampshire State House, it was April of 2008. And we met Virginia Drew here in the Visitor Center. She gave us a tour. I was with a class called Excellence in Public Service. I learned about politics in New Hampshire, and now I mentioned Donna Sitek earlier. She was one of the presenters. I remember that tour very well, and I remember things that Virginia told us, like looking at all the paintings on the wall. She said, "Notice they're all men." Well, that's the way it was back then. I'm going to introduce you now to Virginia Drew.
Hello.
You can hold it.
Welcome again, Representative Nodder. It's always fun when I have representatives that I've built a relationship with come into the Visitor Center. But we welcome people from all over the world. We welcome presidential candidates. We welcome fourth graders. Representative Nodder knows that because she shows up when those fourth graders show up. And we get to do it together and talk about the parrot bill that became the rule that became law with Janine Nodder. But it's a fun place. It's a place steeped in history. The room we're in right now, the Visitor Center, today is a welcome center. But in the 1800s, it was the military office. And I often think about the history in the room, that 1819, this room was much smaller. There were walls. In fact, the building ended about here. And so we were a smaller building. And as Representative Nodder mentioned, it was an all-men thing. When the Civil War began, New Hampshire's men left their homes and came right here to this very room where they enlisted. A few women came, and they were informed that they couldn't serve, but they could serve as matrons or army nurses. And when we go out into the hall, my favorite woman on the wall is right off the Hall of Flags. But eventually, the military moved out. And by the 1960s, this room was used as a committee space. It was used as various things. As you've noted, we don't have a lot of space in the State House, so room accommodations are few and far between. 1978, they created this as a visitor center. We have fabulous Revolutionary War era dioramas that were made for the bicentennial of the United States, and those dioramas have been in here for decades. The room itself has slowly been evolving. One of the things, I'm born and raised New Hampshire, and so being born and raised here, I enjoyed meeting candidates through the years. Working in the State House made it a little easier. And if you look over this way, our presidential primary board is a highlight of those candidates who have come here since 2000. By 2008, I had candidates convinced that they needed to come in. And we've got Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, but we have others that are very well known too, such as Hillary Clinton, John McCain, Mitt Romney, and Bernie Sanders. All the candidates come to our New Hampshire State House to file, and I've convinced people that they need to come and have their picture taken with me if they want to be president. I know. So I got my pictures taken with a lot of people who lost elections, but some did win. And it's been a wonderful experience. The wall goes right up to the ceiling now, and welcoming candidates is a fun and interesting New Hampshire thing. This year, right now, we're in the midst of New Hampshire primary. And so New Hampshire candidates for office are coming in, and born and raised New Hampshire, so I have my own primary wall for New Hampshire candidates. And if I don't have a Nodder button up there, it's only because I need to get one from you, which would be fun.
I had mentioned Vesta Roy Excellence in Public Service Series. I just noticed the button there. Can you tell us who Vesta Roy was?
So Vesta Roy was one of our early women state senators. But more important than that, she was one of the first women to be serving as a Senate president. Governor Hugh Gallen passed away in office. Vesta Roy is actually New Hampshire's very first female governor. She was acting governor because per New Hampshire state constitution, the president of the Senate becomes the acting governor if the governor cannot fulfill their duties. And so we have Vesta Roy, and we have Vesta Roy as one of the only 9 women portraits on the wall of the State House.
Virginia, how long have you been here?
I've been here for 24 years. Every year is different. Every year is interesting. It is a wonderful place to work in, and it's really interesting because I have a close-up view of lawmaking. I get to watch lawmakers come and go. I get to watch bills be made into law, or very often not. It's a historic building. It's a government building. It's a welcome center. It's a place where people come to do business, and it is an honor and privilege working in this building with our volunteer legislators. There's no way around it. When people serve in New Hampshire's government, they're a public servant. They're giving of their time and energy. People who are donating their time and energy are typically really lovely people to meet.
Thank you. Now, it's also a memorial, so we got special permission to film the Hall of Flags, and I'll have you talk about that. We're not allowed to take pictures or film, so this is a special privilege for this documentary.
We're coming out into the Hall of Flags. As Representative Nodder mentioned, this area is not typically photographed because this area is a memorial hall dedicated to New Hampshire's veterans. The flags that you see in these cases are the very flags that were returned at the end of the Civil War and brought back here. We have a message from the Adjutant General asking that the legislature take action with the battle flags that were leaning against the walls, leaning against these columns. And they built cases per legislation in the late 1860s. In the cases, you have 88 Civil War battle flags. They are battle worn. Most of them are made out of silk. They have gold leaf and lead paint on them. Having them in this hall is a little fraught with some concern because the cases when they were built are not airtight, they're not humidity controlled, and yet here we are 160 years later, the battle flags still seem to be in the same condition. There has been discussion about trying to remove the battle flags, to take them and perhaps put them in climate-controlled environment where they would no longer be seen by the public. Instead, the legislature has worked hard to monitor the care of them, but to also keep watch and make sure that the flags do not suffer any further harm. So this is a memorial hall. When we have school groups come in, I always like to say to them, every day is Memorial Day in New Hampshire's Hall of Flags. My favorite flags, obviously, are the Civil War battle flags, but there is a flag that has a very interesting story and background. Now, as we know, these are the flags carried by New Hampshire men at battles such as Antietam. 20,000 lives lost. We have flags that were at Antietam, Bull Run, Chancellorsville, Fredericksburg, Gettysburg. New Hampshire has 3 regiments that served at Gettysburg. Our 12th was one of those regiments that went to the Battle of Gettysburg, where over 58,000 Americans lost their lives. The numbers on top of the plaques correlate below so that you can see which battles those flags fought at. But the interesting flag is this large flag, the number 13, and if you look at the flag, typically you see the field of blue and the stripes. This flag is actually tied onto that staff because it is not a battle flag. This is the actual flag that flew over the capital of Richmond, Virginia. And when Richmond seceded, a free African American named Richard Gill Forrester was working in the Capitol as a page. He took the flag that had been thrown out behind the building. He hid it beneath his cot, where he kept it at great risk to his own life for years. Near the end of the war, New Hampshire's 13th marched on Richmond, and they were amazed the Confederate flag was being lowered as they're coming into the city, which, you know, New Hampshire is coming. Of course, everyone's going to get nervous. But the fact is that that young boy lowered the Confederate flag, and he raised that American flag back up. He joined up with New Hampshire's 13th Regiment. He didn't want to leave the flag at that capital. So they retrieved the flag, they tied it on to this pole, and when it made its way home, and we put the flags in the cases, it made its way in the case. Occasionally, the state of Virginia has contacted us in regards to the flag. I've told them, you seceded, you don't get your flag back. But the also fact is the cases have not been opened. The flags have been in these cases where we've made a promise to the New Hampshire men who carried those flags at great risk of their own life that we would keep them here on display. As time went on, other battles, we have our Roll of Honor. The Roll of Honor lists 697 men, and it's the men and women from the great state of New Hampshire who lost their lives during World War I. This Roll of Honor was placed on the wall in 1926. The flags in each of the corners are World War I flags, and later we made a plaque for New Hampshire's recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor, which recognizes those military who served far and above and typically lost their lives in achieving that honor. The most recent recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor is Sergeant Ryan Pitts from Nashua. And if you have not heard of his story, I would urge people to Google it. Read about this brave American from New Hampshire. We, of course, have flags from World War I and World War II. We have flags from Vietnam. There are no battle flags from the Korean War that are here, but we did have men who served, and we have commemorated them in this plaque with the flags. One of the saddest things is that when we have school groups come, so many of the school children have no idea what the POW MIA flag is. And I love to point that out to them to make them aware that in 1989, meeting in the chambers up above, legislation was passed that the POW MIA flag shall fly in front or on top of every New Hampshire state building, once again showing New Hampshire's commitment to our military.
Thank you for telling that story, because that was, I was a POW MIA activist in the late 80s. So in 1989, my very first article that was ever published was about the last officially listed POW from the Vietnam War. What that means is that he wasn't the last POW, but in 1985, when they had the status review hearings, they had the meetings convened at Randolph Air Force Base in Texas. They went down the list and wrote presumed dead, presumed dead, presumed dead. The last name on the list was Charles E. Shelton, who was shot down over Laos on April 29, 1965. It was his 33rd birthday. He was a reconnaissance pilot. And through the Freedom of Information Act, we learned a lot about his life, and I knew his family. So that's how I got involved in politics, I guess, because I wrote articles and met the families, and I have a ton of information. And if I ever write a book, that's what it's going to be about.
That's awesome. I do think that all my years of watching New Hampshire legislation is that when it comes to something for the veterans, it doesn't matter whether Republican, Democrat, those are the unifying moments in New Hampshire.
Absolutely.
I did make a promise I was going to show one of the very few women and the very first woman to have her portrait on the wall, Harriet Patience Dame. There is nothing like a dame, and she was told that war was no place for a woman, but she signed up to serve with the New Hampshire 2nd Regiment. She was at battles such as Bull Run. At the Battle of Gettysburg, when that battle ended, there were over 7,000 wounded soldiers left in the battlefield, and women like Harriet Dame went into that field for months. She helped nurse soldiers, but very, very sadly, many times she held the hand of a soldier breathing his last breath. She wrote letters home for some of them, and she is a true New Hampshire hero and most certainly deserving of being the first woman on the wall of the State House.
I know the 4th graders like to see this sword. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so the sword on the wall, that sword was created for Colonel Edward Cross, whose portrait is right above it. Colonel Cross was a wild New Hampshire guy, but he led New Hampshire's 5th Regiment. The 5th Regiment sustained more combat losses than any Union Army in our country. The sword was created for him as a gift from his men who beloved their most famous colonel. Unfortunately, Colonel Cross lost his life at Gettysburg, and he never got to see the sword. The sword was gifted to his family, and later the family gifted it to the state of New Hampshire, where it was appropriately shown beneath the portrait of Colonel Edward Cross. It reads that there is established in New Hampshire Medal of Honor, which may be awarded on behalf of the people of the state of New Hampshire to any New Hampshire citizen who has given his or her life while in the line of duty to protect and preserve the rights and freedoms of the people of New Hampshire on or after November 4th, 1979. And so with the creation of this bill, it took us many years to finally have an appropriate display created. The medal was being given out, and Representative Notter was involved in seeing some of those first medals being handed out. This was made by a New Hampshire craftsman, and it's very, very New Hampshire, because what he did was he used woods from the white birch, which is the state tree, as well as other trees that are here in New Hampshire. Very sadly to note is that for a name to be added onto that plaque, it means that they've lost their life.
So, as a freshman legislator, my very first bill was to name a bridge in Merrimack after Corporal Timothy Gibson, and he's on the wall. I see his name there. Several of these mothers were on a committee that I was on to bring the Gold Star Mother statue to New Hampshire. It took years of fundraising. It's in Manchester, in front of the center of New Hampshire.
Oh, yes.
So overlooking Veterans Park. The world-renowned artist Andrew Chernick crafted the statue, and the necklace. Jeanette, he's on the wall. Daniel, Jeanette's mother, that was her necklace, and that's what he chose. So there's other Gold Star Mother statues in other states, but only the one in New Hampshire has her necklace. So if you haven't seen the statue, it's worth going to see. You can see the visible tear rolling down her cheek. She's dressed in the 1940s. There's a potted plant that she's not even aware has fallen over. You can see the telegram. And we went to Gettysburg to pick up that statue, and it was in a parade all the way home. Well, I don't want to use the word parade, but there was cars and veterans that lined the highway all the way to New Hampshire. And when they stopped, they would erect the statue, and other Gold Star mothers could see it. One of the mothers who lost her son in Vietnam saw the telegram and said, "Oh, the telegram," and she made the face that you see on the statue. And the model for the statue was the artist's wife. She had lost a child in a fire, I believe, if I remember the story correctly. And he said, I need to see what your reaction was when that happened. And that the face that you see on the statue is the face she made.
Stopping by the elevator here because 1909 to 1910 is when we put in the back of the building and we created these wonderful elevators. Obviously and hopefully the interior workings is much more modern, but if you look at the amazing ironwork that was done and the artistic ability of when they made this is just a beautiful, splendid thing. Each of those round circles is a separate circle that had to be welded in to the elevator shaft, and it goes all the way up to the second floor, and from the second floor all the way up to the third floor. Our beautiful marble staircase beside the elevator is an interesting thing. You can see as you look at the steps the wear that's happened for over 100 years of men and women trotting up these stairs. And a fun fact is this: if you think about all the presidential candidates who have walked up these stairs, or some of the veterans that came back after the Civil War and were in the legislature, thousands and thousands of men and women have walked these stairs. Now, over here, we have the beautiful Civil War mural. This mural was actually found in Executive Counselor David Wheeler's family's barn. We're just uncovering some interesting history on it. What it appears is that it was a part of a cyclorama showing the Civil War Gettysburg battle. This is showing Pickett's charge. It is extremely accurate, right down to General Lewis Armistead has his sword raised in the air, and if you look closely, his hat is on the end of his sword as he made his last attempt, which unfortunately did not end well for him. You saw Colonel Cross, you saw Harriet Dame, you've seen battle flags that were at this battle. That is one of the things that when people come to the State House, they're going to get so much more than a government building because it's living history right here on the walls and in the halls of the New Hampshire State House.
I'm standing with the Secretary of State, David Scanlon. And how long have you been our Secretary of State?
I've been Secretary for about 3 years. I've been Deputy Secretary before that for 20.
Right. How long was your predecessor here?
He was here for 46 years.
And he's internationally known, I believe.
He sure is, yeah. Well, he has been running the presidential primaries in New Hampshire since 1976. And, he's seen a lot of presidential candidates come through the office. A lot of presidents have been in the office. So, he did a great job.
So New Hampshire is the first in the nation, which means that we have the first primary. Everyone who runs for president comes down this hallway. It's usually lined with supporters that all cheer, and they come into this room, and if you pan the camera to my right, I'm going to have our Secretary of State tell us about what is in this location.
So the walls are lined with photographs from that contain the photos of the major candidates that have participated in the presidential primaries since 1976. And if you look closely at the photos, you'll see a lot of very famous people that you would recognize. And literally all of them come into this office to file when it's time to sign up. And we place a historic desk in the corner. It's actually the desk that was used by Representative Stephen Bullock from Richmond, New Hampshire, who wrote the law over 100 years ago that created New Hampshire's presidential primary. So when the well-known candidates come into the building, many times their supporters line this hallway behind us, and they're chanting and shouting words of encouragement to the candidate as they walk down the hall. And then this room that we're standing in now is usually packed with the national and the international media who want to cover the event of candidates signing up. And then when the candidate finishes filling out the paperwork and paying the $1,000 filing fee, they will answer some questions from the press. And then we take them into the inner office where we have a conference table set up, and the New Hampshire media sit around the table, and they get to ask the candidate New Hampshire-specific questions. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes strange things happen in the process of signing up that are newsworthy, and New Hampshire really has a special position being first. Now, the question is, why should New Hampshire always have the first in the nation primary? And the answer to that is that New Hampshire is the one state, and probably the only state, where anybody that had that dream to grow up and be president of the United States can actually come to New Hampshire and try and make it happen. It's easy to get on the ballot. It's not expensive. You don't need a lot of name recognition or financial backing to be able to run a good campaign. And that's why in the last primary we just had, there were 45 candidates that signed up, 24 on the Democratic Party, and I believe it was 21 on the Democratic side. And many of them you've never heard of, but they all believe that they have what it takes to be president.
So some of the more well-known presidential candidates, there's quite a bit of security. So like Hillary Clinton, excuse me, and Donald Trump, a lot of security. And then others, you're just standing in the hall and you'll see somebody walk by and like, oh, hey, that's a U.S. senator. So I'm holding this book. Can you tell us about what this book is?
That book is the manual for the general court, also known as the Red Book because of its red cover. And that book contains all of the statistics related to the state elections. It has historical information in there related to, there's a list of all the former governors, speakers of the House, Senate presidents. The current legislative listings are in the book. And then usually at the beginning of the book is a historical section that just talks about, whatever's happening at the time. But as years go by, it's a really neat part of the book to go back and look at, just to get a taste of the historical perspective of that time frame.
So the one that I'm holding is from 2017. So I guess these books come out at the end of a term?
So the 2017 Red Book reflects what happened during the 2016 elections. And of course, it takes time to compile the results and then put the proof of the book together, proofread it, get the historical data in there that we would like to incorporate in each book, and then we publish it in the year following the election.
All right, so I remember getting this book at the end of my third term, and I flipped it open, and I said, oh, hey, I'm in here. I'm going to see if my cameraman, my camera woman, Ellen Kolb of Merrimack, can zoom in on this. This is the day that...
Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz. Thank you, because I was here for a lot of signings. Rick Santorum, and I'm looking down. I see Ted Cruz, Bill O'Brien, who was a Speaker of the House. He was the Speaker my freshman term. This is Heidi Cruz. She's been a guest on my show. And then in the red jacket, that's yours truly. So it was very exciting to see that my picture's in this red book.
You're a part of history.
I am. And well, yes, everybody in New Hampshire is part of history. But also on this page, we see Hillary Clinton and this man. He's a governor. I'm looking upside down again.
Yeah, that's John Kasich.
John Kasich and Donald Trump. And this is Steve Stepanek.
And Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders. So I was here when they were setting up for Bernie Sanders, but I didn't actually see him. Who was the most interesting presidential candidate?
Oh, that's a really hard question. They're all interesting. The lesser-known candidates usually have some character to them.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Of course, everybody's heard of Vermin Supreme, I think.
That's what I was getting at. Vermin Supreme. Who is Vermin Supreme?
Vermin Supreme is an outdoor performer from the Boston area that dresses up in a very unique outfit, which includes a winter boot over the top of his head. And he's been a perennial candidate. And the interesting thing is he has quite a following, and it's not unusual for him to get into the hundreds of votes in any given election that he runs in. We've had people come. We had a couple of guys come in one time. They were college buddies. They were probably in their mid-40s, but they had put together a bucket list, and one of them was to run for president. So they came to New Hampshire to do that, and they both ran serious campaigns and did respectably well. We had a person come in here one time, and he filled out the paperwork. There was some information that he needed to complete the filing, and so we called his house, and his wife answered the phone. When we explained to him what we needed, you could hear from the receiver of the phone, "He's doing what?" She had no idea he was signing up to run for president of the United States. He was from out of state. So there's some really amusing stories like that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
As an avid scrapbooker, I think that would be a fun page in my scrapbook to, have my name on the ballot to run for president. But I'm not going to do that.
And then it's always really neat to meet the major candidates and
Yes.
Get a firsthand feel for their personalities, and they're all very impressive. There's a lot of talent in this country, and usually we have some really good candidates.
So in 2016, I had the opportunity to come to almost every one of the filings. So it was very exciting. And I did have some presidential candidates on my show. Rick Santorum, he was on the time before that, and also in 2016. And Carly Fiorina, I was really impressed with her because she explained all these words that we were hearing on the news but didn't really understand, like caliphate. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's great to talk with you. Thanks, Janine.
This gentleman was trapped here while I was interviewing the Secretary of State. We're going to find out what he filed for.
My name is Justin Worthley, and I filed for Carroll County Sheriff.
Well, good luck to you, and I'm sorry
you
you're
so
trapped.
Well, I wasn't trapped. I just wanted to make sure that your first take was a good take, so you did a great job.
Thank you. The clerk of the House, Paul Smith, is here.
Hi, Janine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm going to just hand you the mic, or get closer maybe.
Sure.
So I know you're a Norwich graduate.
I am.
Norwich forever. And you're a fan of
Star Trek.
Star Trek, yes.
Absolutely.
I remember one time there were fourth graders here, and you knew one of the kids, and I taught them all how to do that. So when you walked in, and I've never seen you smile so wide.
I do have a good sense of humor, and I do try to keep it light. Obviously, on session days, I've got to have the game face on because, we have to make sure that we're following our rules of procedure correctly, and I also if somebody, although there are times when folks make jokes or comments, I don't want to give the appearance that I'm favoring anybody or any one side or anything like that. So there have been a couple of times when somebody said something that was so dramatically funny. I had to do this, but otherwise I have to play it fairly straight. As you know, I'm also a high school football official, and so I've got to be neutral and call things correctly. So.
Can you show the viewers the face that you make when somebody's cell phone goes off in Reps Hall?
Oh gosh.
You don't want to get that look. Don't make Mr. Clerk mad. So,
No, that's not true.
how long have you been the clerk?
I'm in my 10th year. Prior to that, I was the assistant clerk for 4 years. Prior to that, I was a legislative aide, and before that, I was a member of the House. I was elected when I was a senior in college, and served 1.5 terms. I was elected twice, but after the first year of my second term, I needed to get a job because, as you know, the salary, the legislative salary doesn't quite cut the mustard these days.
By now, our viewers should probably know that legislators make $100 a year. Unless you're the Speaker of the House, then you get 25% more.
$25 more, not 25%.
Oh.
Well, it does work out that way, but yes, the two presiding officers of the House and the Senate make an extra $50. So.
Did you serve with Representative Maureen Mooney?
I did. Maureen and I were elected at the same time in 2002. I learned a lot. What I did learn most especially is that I love the process. The policy, but the process is really what I gravitated toward. So I really was interested in learning about the rules and the procedures and that sort of thing. And the then clerk, kind of recognized that, and she and I had a conversation one time, and I told her that she had my dream job. And several years later, when she had the opportunity to bring me on as her assistant, she took it. And a few short years later, I succeeded her in office, and it's a natural fit. I love what I do. I love the House of Representatives. I was honored to serve on the State House Bicentennial Commission in 2019. We started in 2014, but we did several years worth of events, and culminating in the week in 2019, where we really celebrated this fantastic building and really, its monument towards democracy. We are this building is unique. Obviously, as you know, we're the oldest continuously used chamber in the country. I've been in older state houses, but a lot of those are ceremonial now. We've been in our chamber in the House of Representatives since 1819. It's laid out a little differently now. Lots changed in 200 years. But when suffrage happened at the next election, women were elected in the House. It's always been the people's house, and it's truly. I get a little bit romantic and sentimental about it sometimes because it truly is representative of all of New Hampshire.
Yes. Earlier today, we were chatting with the Secretary of State, and we talked about his predecessor, Bill Gardner, who was internationally known. I believe you're also legendarily known.
Me?
Yes, aren't you? Aren't you like the head of the clerks?
Well,
something important.
So we do have a National Clerks Society, the American Society of Legislative Clerks and Secretaries. It was founded in 1943, and it really offers the staff of the clerks and secretaries of legislatures the opportunity to get together for professional development. I was the COVID president. I was elected in 2019 and served 2 years to September of 2021. The clerks and secretaries man what we call the Mason's Manual Legislative Commission, and Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure is the parliamentary manual that 77 out of the 99 state legislative chambers use in terms of custom and practices and usages for how things operate on the floor of the House. And I am a member. I was a member of the 2020 Commission for the last year, but I am also a member of the 2030 Commission and serve as its vice chair. So we are doing some work that I can't really talk about yet, but the 2030 edition is going to be fantastic. It is a long process. Every 10 years we update the manual, and we get into topics that may be of importance to various legislatures, and also handle, we sometimes have to change the jargon, the types of terms that we use. But I mean, the manual as it looked in 1950 versus how it looks now is different.
Imagine that.
Yeah. But again, the parliamentary law that the general nature of things like motions and those sorts of things. I mean, those things are timeless, and those things don't change.
So as legislators, we often have to explain to our constituents, what the motions mean,
Yes.
like
Absolutely.
inexpedient to legislate,
Right.
Ought to pass. So I've been in committee hearings and meetings, executive sessions, and people have questions, and you'll see somebody take out a cell phone and text you, and you respond like immediately. How do you handle 400 representatives bothering you every minute?
That's a great question. Well, you elect me. The members of the House elect me, and part of being accessible means that I need to be there for all of you. My cell phone number is on my business card. I give my cell phone out to all members because, especially if you're inside a committee meeting or something, and something doesn't feel right or seem right. I mean, you yourself have texted me during executive sessions before, if you've had questions, and a lot of times I will head right over across the way as well to give the chair guidance. That's my job. My job is to give guidance. My job is to tell them the correct procedures for handling certain motions or situations that might not seem normal, that sort of thing. So because of that, I am available. I am available on the weekends. Reps call me or text me or email me on the weekends. I do tend to tell members, if you could please not text me between like the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. I'd appreciate it, just because I would like to get a little bit of sleep. And I do have two little kiddos. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, so I do try to get some good family time in. I am accessible because I need to be. You all need that from your clerk, because we work together. My job is to make sure you're successful in your job.
I know, and I know you're a stickler for procedure. So even things like speaking out of turn, in a committee hearing, you need to be recognized by the chairman before you speak.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Is there anything you want to add for our viewers?
No, I would just say that I appreciate that you do this service for your community as well. It's good to see our members inform people about what's happening up here in Concord. We get questions a lot of times, especially you mentioned motions on the floor. We get a lot of questions in my office because my office handles the public in terms of questions. And a lot of times we get questions about, why did my member voted no on this bill and I told him to vote yes? Well, the question is, what was the question before the body? Was it ought to pass, or was it inexpedient to legislate, or was it interim study? So those are, a lot of times I spend time on the phone talking to constituents about some of the actions you all take, but also my office is here to help the public as well in not only understanding the process, but even who their members might be. We deal with. I have spoken on the phone for an hour and 45 minutes with an angry citizen before, because sometimes just giving them the opportunity to vent is important, because they need to feel heard, they need to feel represented, and so I appreciate that you take the time in your community to do that.
It's interesting that you say that. So in closing, I'm just going to share something with you. before I was a representative, and I started my show in 2006. People would watch the show and they felt like I was somebody they could talk to. I remember getting phone calls from people in my town who just needed someone to listen to them, no matter what their issue was, whether they were a farmer or it was, and I remember that now. So, thank you.
Thank you.
We're in the speaker's office, not because I'm in trouble waiting to see the principal, but because we want to chat with him. You were on my show in Merrimack, and we spent a long time talking about the parking garage, and I did mention the parking garage. And how is that project coming along?
Well, it's actually coming along, fairly well. The old building is gone. All the excavation is completely done, and so now we're just waiting for the next step to get in there and start the actual construction. Hopefully, it should be done maybe a year and a half. But obviously, the Store Street parking garage that is there now, each year it gets worse and worse. Mm-hmm. And, that's why it was imperative that we actually put together, this project, because otherwise we would have to, one of these years, we're going to have to condemn the Store Street. And then the members would literally have no place to park.
Wow. And with 400 members in the House and 24 members in the Senate. Oh, the Senate doesn't park in the stores. No, okay, just the House. And where does the staff park?
Well, some of the staff does park in the lower level of the LOB, but they're scattered all over Concord too. And this garage will be big enough for the members and the most of the staff, and we'll retain our parking for handicapped on around the buildings.
400 representatives, and you're in charge of placing them on committees, and you have every representative writes down their 3 choices. And maybe 50 all ask for the same committee. How do you do that? How do you determine who's going to go where and make everybody happy?
Well, I don't think you ever make everybody happy, but we try our best obviously seniority does play a little bit of a role in, what committee you're on. If you've been on a committee for 4 or 5 terms, we're not gonna pull you off that committee and put on a freshman. But we have a excellent rate of percentage of filling, the first choices. I think we're up around 85% of filling first choices and second choices. And I would say almost 96, 97% of the members will get one of their first 3 choices. Occasionally, we got a committee like Fish and Game or Legislative Administration that doesn't meet that often, and a lot of people that have time constraints want to get on a committee like that, and it just isn't possible. So we have to go with who's on the committee now, and the different circumstances, and try and work it out. But it's a lot more time consuming than most people would think. And one of the other most time consuming things we do is, because we have a certain number of parking spaces around the building, those are kept for handicapped. Somebody that is handicapped or has an operation that's they need a handicapped space for a while.
If somebody asked me what's the most frustrating part of being the Speaker of the House, I would say parking, finding parking for everyone, because that's the one thing. Like every day, there's some issue with parking or people stealing other people's spots. And then, have you ever had to tow anyone?
We haven't yet. Will we in the future? Who knows? But we haven't had to yet. Most people, House Protective Services will usually track the person down and have them move the car if they're parking in somebody's space that is going to be here. Especially if it's if the person has some kind of medical needs that they need to they need to walking disability or something like that. That they need to have their space. I mean, they can't go across the street to stores, And the fact of the matter is, we don't even have enough spaces. If every legislator showed up for session, we do not have enough spaces across the street and parking to accommodate everybody. We have to find auxiliary places to stick them. And that's why this parking garage has got to make life so much easier for both the staff and the legislators. I mean, it's 409 spaces, and it's going to make a huge difference. Huge difference. I mean, legislators get $100 a year. At least we can have a place for them to park.
Yes, but we all know throughout the day today that you get 25% more than we get, so $125 a year. Also earlier today, we spoke with the clerk, Mr. Clerk, and we talked about how he keeps that poker face during session, and he's a real stickler for procedure. And I asked him to show the viewers the look he gives to legislators when their phone goes off, and he accommodated. So can you do the same and show us the look that you give us and when we do something we're not supposed to do in the House?
I prefer not to.
He said he prefers not to. I didn't have the mic over there. Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for meeting with us today.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm very excited about this next segment because we're going to be talking to a staffer. He works for the Senate, and I've known this young man since he was 5 years old. He was my son's best friend, still is. I've known him all these years. We've had many summer adventures, taking those boys everywhere, all over God's creation, learning about history, and I think that's part of the reason he's here. So welcome, Peter Mulvey.
Yes, thanks for having me, Janine. I can just take this from you. Yeah, it's very exciting being here, and that's definitely an accurate statement that all the trips we've been on, all the places you've taken Blaze and I through the years is definitely why I've been inspired to work for the state and be here. And now I get to call you a coworker of sorts, which is another, great new element to our relationship. So.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do as a staffer?
I just help Senator Murphy. I take care of, his emails, his meetings. I take care of his legislative agenda, so I make sure that he's ready for committee. He has, all his documents ready, make sure that, people that he's expecting to be there are showing up. And so I just sort of facilitate whatever he needs to get done.
So you've been here 2 years now, I believe.
Yep.
Well, I didn't know that you worked here, and I've seen the door open, and out of the corner of my eye, I'd walk by and I'd see a gentleman sitting here, but I never looked in. So then when I found out that you worked here, I barged into your office one day. I said, "You've been here 6 months and I didn't know."
Yeah, I kept it a pretty good secret for a while. Yep. Mm-hmm. But, once we discovered that we shared a workplace, we've definitely had our meetings. So.
So looking back at our summer adventures, I know I took you to meet a lot of presidential candidates, and then every once in a while I'll think of something, like a museum we've been to. So are there any museums of historical significance that come to mind that were really endearing to you?
Yes, and I think you know the answer. The Wright Museum, and I think it's Wolfboro, is it? Yeah, that's a great place. If you haven't been, you have to go. It's awesome. They have so many great pieces of actual, artillery, uniforms. It's really awesome place. That definitely started the ball rolling for us, for sure.
I don't remember how old you guys were then, but I know that you said thank you all day long. Thank you so much for taking me to that place.
It was awesome. Never seen any place like it. Never more of a higher concentration. It was really rich history, and then the people who run it were also great too. So it's a really awesome place.
So then we went again one time after a hike with our camera woman, Ellen Kolb. We went, we did a hike, and then we went to the Wright Museum, and she said she used to work across the street and never noticed it there.
There's a big tank coming out the wall. So.
Yeah. So yeah, we should go again sometime. Because I still love history, and especially World War II history.
Absolutely, I'm sure boys will love it too.
So there is a museum that I just learned about that has a tomahawk scarred door, and it's can't remember where it's at now, but it's down in Massachusetts. I'm like, oh wow, it's about 2 hours away, but that would have been a fun adventure to go with our list of adventures. We went to go see the lantern, one of Paul Revere's lanterns. We saw the tea that was thrown in the harbor.
That was a good one. Yeah, we've done the Freedom Trail, and then also Minuteman National Park. Is that the one in Concord and Lexington?
Yes.
That's another great one. I remember that one as well. That was really fun.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Indian Museum. We went to that, and we went out to breakfast, and you had a big giant pancake that was bigger than you, and you couldn't finish it.
Yeah, yep. Still can't finish all my food. That's the biggest order I think I've ever had. Yeah.
And of course, we always had to have chocolate milk in the house just for you.
Yeah, that hasn't changed at all. There's still that.
So upstairs, we were chatting with Representative Maureen Mooney, and we talked about the Ronald Reagan birthday parties.
Yep, I remember those. Yeah, it's been a bit, but those were always a good time, and always a big turnout too.
Yes, and I have failed to keep jelly beans in stock in my office, and I see you haven't either. We need to remedy that.
Yeah, I think we'll both need to do some remediation on that.
Is there anything that you'd like to say or tell the viewers?
I just want to thank you for all the contributions you've made, towards, my career and, inspiring me to go down this path, and just all your service to the town of Merrimack and the state of New Hampshire. And just thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Peter. I still remember you being 5 years old and playing Legos. So I'm across the street from the LOB. This is the old post office. LOB stands for Legislative Office Building. LOB stands for Legislative Office Building. Now, looking at it, you would think it was 3 stories, but it's actually 4. So we have the first floor, and it's a long stairway up to the second floor. And then at the top, that's the 4th floor. The 3rd floor is in the back. There's a newer part to accommodate all the committee rooms. We have a policeman's memorial. Across the street from that, there's an empty lot, and that is where the new parking garage will be.